Hi everybody, Zach Keenan here for DevilsDigest.com alongside our publisher, Hode Rubino. Week 1 is in the past following a 41-14 ASU win over Southern Utah, and Week 2 against the UNLV Rebels is upon us. Hode, with that, now that you've had a little more time to examine this ASU win, are there some things that maybe we can just chalk off to being pregame jitters, first time in Sun Devil Stadium with fans in over 600 days, or were there some issues that may come back up to haunt this ASU team again on Saturday?
Well, Zach, I think you really hit the nail on the head when you talk about the first game jitters, because Herm Edwards said that as veteran as this team is, especially on defense, that kind of went out of the window when you are playing in front of fans for the first time in, 640-some days. And by the way, I should give a shout-out to the ASU fans, I think, for a season opener. But sometimes you don't have the greatest of crowds the Thursday before Labor Day long weekend. I thought the crowd was tremendous, especially the student section. And I could see the juices probably flowing just a little too hard for those ASU players. And again, it doesn't matter if you're 3, 4, or 5, like Chase Lucas, 6 years in the program, or you're just a newcomer. And let's not forget that we really have two classes of newcomers at Arizona State, and really two classes of freshman students at ASU, if you want to look at it that way, that have never seen a live football game. So I just think that the emotion, overcoming the passion really was on display, and Herm Edwards did admit as such. So yes, I think that is something that really has to be cleaned up. I mean, I know that's overstating the obvious, but I think it's also a good chance that it will be cleaned up because, okay, you got that out of your system. Even if the crowd is going to be louder and larger this week than it was last week, I'd like to think that the penalties and just putting a little too many style points in each and every play is going to be a thing of the past. But Herm Edwards did talk about the kicking game being a concern going into the season, and unfortunately what we saw did validate those concerns. Now, Logan Tyler, to his credit, ended up, I should say, having 5 touchbacks in the game. However, his first kickoff did go out of bounds, and I think kind of set the tone to his performance in terms of the point after attempts, where he missed not one but 2 of those. ASU actually goes for two-point conversions. I know it doesn't do a whole lot for Logan Tyler's confidence, but confidence also has to be earned from the coaching staff. So that's something that you hope is not going to be a season-long issue. As we already know, Christian Zendejas, the place kicker from last year, somebody who's been in the transfer portal literally for the entire calendar year, is back on the team. There's a chance he will suit up for the UNLV game, so I could see him taking over the PATs. I can see him taking over field goals. There were not any field goals attempted last Saturday, but I could see Christian Zendejas, if he is going to be suited up on Saturday, being the one executing the field goal kicking. So that's something that if you're an ASU coach and fan, you'd like to see that to be corrected, and there's no better time than the present. So Saturday, that's something you definitely want to see happening and really progressing in the right direction. As far as the passing game, and we talked about it in the preview, this was not an intimidating secondary by any means that ASU was facing. And sure, you did have the choppiness and the penalties that maybe did prevent the ASU passing game from really getting into a flow. But at the same time, you really would like to see a passing game that is really going from the concern to the strength side of the ledger, or maybe somewhere in between. Rather than an aspect that we're sitting here right now while we still have question marks, and we're going to talk about it later on when we look at the UNLV defense. Again, you're not facing a secondary that's coming in after a stellar performance defending the pass, and that's something that you'd like to see some movement in the right direction when it comes to Arizona State and their passing game. So it'll be interesting to see if they can do that against UNLV, because if we see a performance that's very similar to Southern Utah, then you probably move away from, okay, it was the first game jitter explanation to this might be a concern for 2021.
Well, let's take a look at the UNLV offense, and they played Eastern Washington in week 1. They put up 33 points, which is great for an offense, but it was a weird game because 27 of those points were scored in the fourth quarter and in overtime. It was a double overtime home loss to Eastern Washington, so no doubt a totally weird game, but it sounds like their offense has a little similarities to ASU's offense in that the run game is already well established, but passing, they've had some troubles early on.
Yeah, let's talk about the passing game, and we thought maybe there would be some kind of quasi quarterback controversy with UNLV because their starting quarterback Justin Rogers did not perform well. Doug Brumfield came in, was a huge part of that. I guess you would call it comeback to tie the game and force it into overtime. The offense scored 14 points in the fourth quarter. Brumfield was definitely a big part of that. He was just more explosive in his approach, a pretty good runner as well too. So he's actually going to get his first road start this week in Tempe. So now you're just kind of wondering, okay, a young quarterback, not a whole lot of experience getting his first road start. How does he really react to that set of circumstances? And look, I'm not a believer in moral victories, but the offense, just because of what they were able to do, and like you said, in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter, and really in overtime, it didn't fall flat on their face. They just were a missed 2-point conversion from sending the game into triple overtime and possibly winning it. But I think that this offense maybe has something to hang their hat on as far as the passing game. But you're absolutely right, Zach. It really is all about the running game. Charles Williams, the running back for the Rebels, 172 yards on only 27 carries, 2 touchdowns. And I know we're used to Herm Edwards, and later on this week, I'm sure the players and the coaches are doing the right thing and showing respect to their opponent. But I just felt when Herm Edwards in his weekly press conference this week was talking about Charles Williams and the running game, it was a little more than respect. It was like, okay, you really got my attention, and I don't care if you're playing for a Group 5 or a Power 5 program. So Charles Williams is definitely the straw that stirs the drink that is the UNLV offense. And not to oversimplify the game plan over here for the ASU defense, but they're gladly going to take their chances with Doug Brumfield and the passing game for UNLV as long as they can keep Charles Williams in check. And I think it's a very good test for what awaits ASU in just a few weeks, facing some really good caliber running backs. So for UNLV, you obviously are going to really try to ride that momentum that Charles Williams started last week with a very stout running game. And for the Arizona State defense, if they can stop that, again, I think they'll gladly take their chances with the UNLV passing game, which wasn't horrible, especially in the second half and overtime, but still clearly not the strength of UNLV.
Now, on the defense for UNLV, it was another seesaw performance in this double OT home loss to Eastern Washington, where they shut out Eastern Washington in 2 of the quarters, the defense did, and then I believe all of Eastern Washington's points were scored later on in that fourth quarter and overtime, so definitely seesaw is the right word. Is this maybe just an example of a unit that isn't getting the support it needs from its offense?
Yeah, I think that's really an excellent point, and we've seen it with ASU, we've seen it with a lot of teams around the country that the defense, as well as it's playing early in the game, if that support from the offense is really late to arrive, let alone not arriving at all, then the defense is going to have it's breaking points. There's really no doubt about that. So it's a defense that was able to force 3 turnovers. And when you talk about a fourth quarter where UNLV shut out Eastern Washington 14-0, obviously the defense was a huge part of that. So this isn't necessarily an inferior unit, and I think it's definitely a better unit than what we saw from Southern Utah. But going back to my earlier point, you look at the number of yards that they gave up in the air, 374. This is not a stout secondary by any means. Now, maybe Eastern Washington didn't even try to run the ball that much, and that's why they did not eclipse the century mark on the ground. But nonetheless, if ASU's passing game is looking for another opportunity to really kickstart that aspect, to stop me and probably others from talking about this being an area of concern, this week is another opportunity. And I'm not going to jump ahead to the BYU game next week, but in a win against University of Arizona, they gave up 345 yards in the air. So I don't know if these opportunities are really going to present themselves in this magnitude later on in the year. So this is why the Arizona State passing game has to take advantage of that. Now, yes, the bread and butter of ASU is the running game. And I think just like ASU is going to be very concerned about stopping the run, I have no doubt that UNLV is going to try to do the same. And and maybe even a sign of disrespect, if you want to frame it that way, they might be okay taking their chances with Jaden Daniels, as long as ASU running backs are really kept in bay. So I think that those opportunities that are going to present themselves with not a lot of double teams on the ASU wide receivers, a lot of one-on-one opportunities. Arizona State passing game really has to take care of that. And I'm not even hinting that the ASU passing game should be the lion's share of the offensive snaps for the Sun Devils. I realize that this is still going to be a more than 50% run opportunity, but you like to see the passing game really just early on, really establishing itself and showing that this offense can be balanced. Because even though the numbers were balanced on the stat sheet against Southern Utah, there really was not a whole lot to write home about the passing game. So I'd like to see the ASU offense really be balanced but in a more effective way. Again, I'm not saying give up on the running game by any means, but really have the passing game take advantage of the opportunity that's presented themselves, just like it was like last week, just like it will be next week.
Yeah, Zach Hill, Jaden Daniels, the wide receivers, should be licking their chops after looking at that film of UNLV and how they handle the pass game. It's a great opportunity to fine-tune and showcase what this aerial attack could possibly be later on in the season. With that in mind, we've discussed what you've seen from ASU, what we're going to expect from UNLV. What's your prediction? How do you see Saturday night, 7:30 p.m. kickoff unfolding?
Well, I think there should be another comfortable win for Arizona State. There's no doubt in my mind that UNLV is a higher caliber opponent. Again, I'm not a big believer in moral victories, but even though it was a bitter home loss to an FCS team for the Rebels last week, there are some positives, especially with the play in the second half, fourth quarter, overtime, that UNLV can draw upon and maybe come in with a little more confidence than you think a normal team coming off a week one loss at home would arrive here in Tempe. It's really hard for me to see the ASU offense exploding until I see this passing game really kicking it in to the next gear. But on the other hand, this defense, they're probably going to have a more formidable task compared to last week. But I'm really comfortable with the way they're playing. And again, when you talk about a quarterback for UNLV having his first road start ever, this is not exactly an ideal situation to come into under those circumstances. So if ASU can clean up the penalties, which I think they can, if ASU's passing game and kicking game can at least make some strides in the right direction, which I also believe that they can, this should be a comfortable win for ASU. But again, I can't see really an explosion of points on the scoreboard, but I think the defense can definitely do its thing, and maybe even whatever points they give up might be really more garbage time points rather than points that really keep the game close, like it happened last week, at least in some stretches. So, ironically or not, I think the scores are going to be very similar to what we saw last Saturday against Southern Utah. ASU coming on top, 44-14.
Very similar to last week, in fact. Well, for Theo, thank you so much for your time. And make sure as ASU looks to improve to 2-0 on the season, that you keep it locked in for all of your pre, during, and post-game coverage to DevilsDigest.com. And if you haven't already, give us a follow on Twitter at DevilsDigest. For our publisher, Hode Rubino, I'm Zach Keenan. ASU looks to improve against 2-0 against UNLV Saturday, 7:30 p.m.